Does killing someone with the law on your side make it right? Is it somehow morally superior to clinically take the life of another human being if pomp and ceremony is attached to the process and the killing is done by a professional who has made it their life's work?
Thou shalt not kill? Don't think for a moment I didn't grapple with those same issues as a participant in that process, Lalonde. I wasn't personally in favor of the death penalty, but I am a believer in due process and the rule of law, and both were followed in this case.
I agree with you on all counts. Utilitarian philosophers like Jeremy Bentham or believers in categorical imperatives like Immanuel Kant had their own considered philosophies on these issues. But as for me, I'm just an old copper.
Yeah, baby. Me too. So, here's to us, and those like us. Two old dicks.
We are two old dicks here to share history's mysteries. We hope you care. We are two old dicks and England half.
Welcome back to episode 5 and the conclusion of The Mystery of Simpering Jim, folks. I'm Dave Lalonde. I'm a retired police detective and the author of the Inspector Jack Butler Mysteries.
And I'm John Wilson Murray, better known as the Great Detective. Lalonde, I've become a real fan of your books. Don't keep them selfishly to yourself. Share them with the folks at home. Tell them how they can enjoy them too.
Thank you, and absolutely, my pleasure. The entire series is available on Amazon, and I've added a link below. These are historic police procedural mysteries set in the 1980s in Ontario, Canada. They are based somewhat on my own experiences, and I think you'll enjoy them. The novels give you a behind-the-scenes view of what a police investigation really looks like, and I hope you'll find the stories gripping and entertaining. Check them out.
Give us a quick recap of where we stand after the first 4 episodes, will you, old boy? We've come a long way.
With pleasure. The time is 1897 and the setting is on a farm just outside the town of Galt in southwestern Ontario, Canada. The lovely lady you see in this picture was Emma Orr, and she lived on the farm with her husband and 3 children. The man you see beside her was their farmhand, Jim Allison. On August 9th, Emma Orr's husband, Tony, left the farm with their young son, Norman, to deliver a hog to his brother, promising to return in a few hours. Emma remained there with her eldest daughter, Maggie, who was upstairs sick in bed, and her 18-month-old daughter, Mary Bell.
And Simpering Jim Allison.
And Jim Allison. When Emma's husband, Tony, returned, Emma was nowhere to be found. Their baby was unattended, Maggie had just gotten out of her sickbed, and Jim Allison was standing there, laughing like an idiot. All Allison would tell him is that his wife was gone. An extensive search was conducted. People weren't sure if she had taken her own life because of some ongoing family problems, or if she had eloped. Emma was known to be very popular with men, in fact had several regular male visitors to the farm, and had eloped once before. The mystery of her disappearance was solved a week later when her decomposing body was found in a shallow grave right near her house. The local investigation turned up a number of suspects, but one emerged above all others: the farmhand, Jim Allison, also known as Simpering Jim for the disingenuous, fawning expression he would put on his face when others spoke.
This might sound a tad judgmental, but some faces are born to punch. Just saying.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Well, looks aren't everything. Anyhow, once Emma's body was found, you, Chief Inspector John Wilson Murray were called in to assist the local police.
Now there's a handsome fellow.
As the head of the Government of Ontario's small detective force, you arrived, took charge, and within a day narrowed the suspects down to Allison alone. An inquest was held in Galt the following day, and extensive witness testimony was heard over the course of the next 3 days. The jury arrived at the conclusion that Emma Orr had been brutally murdered, and that James Allison, the farmhand, was responsible. He was charged with murder and went to trial in December 1897, where the evidence was tested further. The result was that Allison was found guilty of Emma Orr's murder, and he was sentenced to death by hanging. Does that sound right, Inspector Murray?
Yes, that is accurate, though I think you could have spent a little more time talking about me and what a marvelous job I did. I suppose folks will have to go back and watch the other episodes to see that, though.
I guess so. Well, if you're ready, let's move ahead to late January 1898, just 5 short months from the date of the murder itself. Jim Allison was in prison in Kitchener. Whoops, I mean Berlin. Hey, the Germans are rearming these days, so you never know. Hope springs eternal in the Teutonic heart. Anyhow, Jim had apparently embraced religion and used his remaining time learning to read and write with the assistance of Mrs. Ellen Cook, who was the prison governor's wife. A couple of things of note about Governor Jonathan Cook are that he had been a teacher previously, and his wife Ellen was 10 years older than him. He ended up being the longest-serving governor of the jail and was 47 years old in 1897. The governor and his wife lived with their 2 children in the house provided for them, attached to the prison.
Yes, he was a grand fellow, and that was a grand building. Almost 50 years old now, just like him.
Uh-huh. Well, 50 years old in 1897, that is. Those were the days. The building is still in use today, actually, but not as a jail.
Wait, don't tell me. My efforts put an end to all crime, didn't they?
Not quite. You did pretty well, though.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
You did say it, actually. Often. But let's move on. Allison expressed his curiosity regarding the hanging process to Governor Cook.
Will it be a drop or a jerk-up that they use?
Just for context, the upright jerker on the left was a novel method of hanging that came into practice in the late 1800s. It was actually patented in the United States, of course, in 1895. It did not live up to its objective of being swift and humane. I believe a previous case of yours involving Reginald Burchell used this method.
Yes, at the Oxford Jail in Woodstock, 7 short years ago in 1890. I did not attend, as you know. And up yours too, Burchell, you murderous scoundrel! Goodness gracious, that man! You know how some people really get under your skin?
Yep. So Allison was informed of the method to be used.
It will be a drop, Jim.
I shall come down faster than I went up. Will I at least get a new suit for the hanging?
No, Jim.
It's not fair. I wish they'd finish with building that scaffold. The noise is bothering me.
The scaffold was built in a stone woodshed in the jail yard. The trapdoor mechanism, which I assume is a little more technical in engineering terms, was specially designed and brought from Barrie. It had already been used in another case of yours, Hendershot and Welter.
You're depressing me now. That is correct, though. Thanks for reminding me, Mr. Sunshine.
I hear you. Sorry about that. Justice isn't intended to be uplifting, of course, but it's the job we chose. We'll be talking about them at a later time, but for now, let's get back to this case.
Uplifting? Is that meant to be gallows humor? Because of the upright jerker used on Burchell? You're a sick punster, Lalonde.
A slip of the tongue, I assure you. Let's move on before we get ourselves in any deeper. This case drew some significant media attention, as you would expect. The local news reported again on the latest confession Allison had made to them after his appeal failed. This time, Allison claimed that since he had started working for the Orrs in April 1897, they had treated him unkindly, like a beast. By the middle of July, he had become murderous in his hatred for them. On July 25th, he had dug the grave for them, that one that was later discovered, unused, and waited for the opportune moment to kill them.
Opportune. Ha! More like importune. Carry on, Lalonde.
Gotcha. Just reading what Allison claimed. According to him, the last straw for him was on Friday, August 7th, 3 days before the murder, when Tony Orr allegedly told him he could not go on a group excursion to Niagara Falls that the town of Galt had planned for the holiday on Monday. When Monday came, he waited for Tony to leave and sat eating his breakfast. Then, he loaded his shotgun and hid it in the barn. While completing all of his chores, he found himself eyeballing Emma with hatred the entire time. More likely it was something like this, in my opinion. Anyway, back to his version. Once she had milked the last cow, he approached her with the shotgun, raised it, lowered it again, and then pointed it at her and fired. She fell to the ground and screamed, "Oh, James!" And I'm calling bullshit on her calling him James as her final words. Anyway, back to the way things happened according to Allison. Allison claimed that he then went and picked up an axe and struck her head with a terrific blow. He said that his coolness never left him for a moment during all of this. Then, he dug the shallow grave in the corn patch and dragged Emma's body by the arms into the grave and smoothed it over. Afterwards, he dutifully completed his final chores by returning the cows to Barry's farm. He added that the Toronto newspaper's earlier reports of his first confession were false.
I call balderdash. His version is a load of self-serving rubbish. What a monstrous act.
I must agree with you. I'm betting that after his advance was rejected, he ran upstairs full of rage and grabbed his shotgun, then came back down to begin his cowardly attack on her. Let me leave my full reasons for that until the end of this episode, though. Tony Orr visited with Allison for the day prior to the execution and spent 2 hours with him. Allison apparently confessed to him as well at that time. Amazing.
I shot Mrs. Orr first, and then struck her with the shotgun.
And yet another version. I wonder on one level why Tony felt compelled to go and see Allison, but in another way I kind of understand it.
Yes, he was trying to make sense of things, I suppose, to find some reason in the madness of it all.
Tony left the prison with the clothing of his dead wife in his possession and returned home. It's been my experience that this need to have a tangible connection to the events is perhaps something only victims of crime can truly understand. That home was going to feel awfully empty without Emma.
Indeed.
Time now to meet the man who will carry out the sentence of the court, the executioner, Jack Radcliffe.
Exercise. You certainly don't need any more exercise than you're getting by watching this episode and sucking back a little more scotch, dear viewer. Look at me. I'm as fit as a fiddle. Ushkabeh. Whiskey. The water of life. I'd add some cheese and smoked salmon to that order as well. The only exercise I do is clicking like and subscribe to videos about important men, like this one is. So, stay fit, stay strong, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Slonjavar, baby!
Yikes. Kinda hard to find an appropriate place to video insert that in this episode. It's all so heavy.
You ain't in Kansas anymore, Dorothy. Ready to meet Radcliffe?
John Robert Radcliffe. He was described as pleasant-faced man with a red mustache and small blue eyes. He'd been appointed officially as Canada's first professional hangman in 1892, but he'd executed people in accordance with the law prior to that. Radcliffe was an Englishman by birth and said to be a genial man who considered himself a public benefactor.
If there has to be hangings, the only merciful thing is to do 'em right. I used to be a sailor on the China Seas, and we common seamen was often detailed to hang Chinese pirates from the yardarm. I was sorry for the poor blighters. They used to struggle and suffer so. So I figured out how to do it quick and merciful-like.
When Radcliffe wasn't fulfilling these duties, he worked as a steward at the Sunnyside Rowing Club in Toronto. That was until an inspector with the Northwest Mounted Police, who was a member of the club, found out. He told everyone and announced he would not be a member as long as Radcliffe worked there. He had him fired.
What a damn hypocrite! As you know, I was not in favor of capital punishment, but it was the law of the land, and the man was hired to do the state's bidding. I knew Radcliffe and respected him as a professional, though, he certainly liked his liquor.
He was considered a competent executioner who got the job done quickly. He's credited with hanging at least 69 people in Canada, though he likely hung many more over the course of his life. We'll meet Radcliffe again in future episodes.
Not as his, clients, I hope?
Not to worry. And so, to the day of the execution, February 4th, 1898. Allison had spent the evening before in the company of Reverend Atkinson, who left at around 10 p.m. He fell asleep, watched over by the turnkey, Otto Gastmeyer, and awoke at around midnight.
I'm hungry. Can you get me something to eat?
They got him something to eat and he ate heartily apparently, and then fell back into a sound sleep with no signs of restlessness. He had prepared a final written message.
Friends, it will be a little while, and all will be all over. I am sorry for my crime. I did it out of ill will. I hope those whom I injured will forgive me, and none will turn this up to my people. And may God have mercy on my soul. James Allison.
Allison awoke at 6 a.m. and ate heartily again, this time a breakfast of eggs, toast, and coffee.
This is depressing.
Yep, it's like a nightmare. Were you there for the execution?
Actually, I was ill that day, but I had been planning on coming to Berlin to see a friend from Buffalo. Regardless, I would not have been attending the execution.
The witnesses to the execution started assembling just before 7 a.m. It was a piercingly cold morning, but everyone's thoughts were elsewhere. High Constable John Clippert, your old friend and the man who had assisted you with the investigation, was there. A group of reporters had assembled, and though they would not be allowed to witness the execution itself, he allowed them to wait in a small room inside the jail while the final preparations were made. It was reported that the newsmen indulged in the occasional joke in that tight space while they waited to go into the jail yard.
Gallows humor, they call it. Understandable in those tense circumstances, though it was never my way.
Nor mine. At about 5 minutes to 8 o'clock, Radcliffe, the executioner, entered Jim Allison's cell and bound his arms to his sides with a strap.
I guess we are all ready now, so we better go.
Allison said nothing and calmly followed his executioner into the corridor where the solemn death march to the scaffold was formed. It was led by a local justice of the peace, Alfred Boomer, then the jailer, Governor Cook. Behind them was the coroner, Dr. Webb, and then the jail surgeon, Dr. Bowlby. Next was Jim Allison with the Reverend Atkinson, and finally the turnkeys, Otto Gastmeyer and Thomas Tracy, who had been keeping the death watch on Allison. As they entered the jail yard, the spectators formed a lane, and with uncovered heads watched them approach. Some thought Allison had a slight smile on his face, but though he showed no signs of faltering, The more cool-headed and experienced witnesses believe they saw some evidence of nervousness and a deep concern. As the procession marched from their view and into the stone woodshed, Reverend Atkinson could be heard slowly and solemnly uttering the following words.
Have mercy upon me, O God, according to thy loving kindness. According to the multitude of thy tender mercies, blot out my transgressions.
They ascended the 13 steps up to the scaffold and assembled on the platform. The last minute of Allison's life was spent while he stood upon the deadly trap door. The drop was set at 9 feet 4 inches, the extra 4 inches thought necessary due to his thick neck. Radcliffe drew the back cap over his head and placed the fatal noose around his neck. The hangman's knot was positioned under Allison's left ear. Just before the bolt was drawn that ushered his soul into eternity, Reverend Atkinson began to pray.
O Almighty God, we humbly pray thee to receive the soul of this, one of thy children, for whom thy Son...
A second after the last syllable was uttered came 3 clicks as the mechanism released. Then the head of Allison, which could only be seen by a few near the woodshed door, shot out of sight, and a heavy thud was heard. Nothing further occurred to indicate that the executioner had not made a clean job of it. Dr. Bowlby, the jail surgeon, examined the body.
Death was almost instantaneous, the neck being broken, although the heart continued to beat about 8 minutes after the drop. The death resulted from a compression of the spinal cord in the cervical region.
Reporters got to see the scaffold afterwards and examined the body, which hung there still for another half hour. The body was placed in a plain black coffin and buried in an unmarked deep grave below these upper windows in the jail yard.
The jury impaneled brought in the usual verdict that James Allison died from process of law.
And that was the cold, hard reality, the process of law.
Yes, it was. For Allison, at any rate. Emma Orr had already faced her own cold, hard reality at his hands.
Indeed. This was the best photograph that was available of her through the newspapers. I found she resembled the Scottish actress, Michelle Fairley, which would make sense because of her Scottish ancestry. I've tried my best to enhance Emma's original portrait to capture her beauty.
She should be remembered for the beautiful, albeit complicated person that she was. Aren't we all? I think we captured her spirit with this photograph. I, like you, only came to know her through the memories of others, and it is important to be kind and compassionate.
And so ended the life and the case of Jim Allison. For him, at least. Once again, I've tried to capture him and not dwell too much on the many descriptions of his appearance, which were not flattering. The moniker of Simpering Jim, perhaps, says it best.
Trust me, that was one weird-looking dude in person. The sad reality was that he left behind his own grieving family, as well as that of Tony Orr and his children, and the other members of her family who loved her so dearly. His parents pled for his body to be released to them for burial, but, as is the custom of the law, that was denied by the sheriff. He was to be buried, like the 3 others who met their fate in the same way, in the yard that witnessed the final moments of their lives. Many in our nation questioned the justice behind executing a boy of his age, but I believe his youth was only one factor to be considered.
Very true. I must admit, though, that it is the Orr family that receives my greatest concern. The children all returned to live with Tony on the farm. On June 6, 1898, he actually brought them to the jail in Berlin, where he showed them the woodshed where Allison had been hanged. That may seem gruesome to some, and in fact may be so. But in my experience, the families of victims more often than not want as many details as they possibly can to help them make sense of the insensible. It varies, but I think it's healthy and normal.
The victims' families are so often forgotten in these cases, as the focus of attention is placed upon the accused. While not a proponent of the death penalty itself, my sympathies do not lie with Jim Allison in this case.
I feel the same as you. Much was made of his repentance and religious epiphany in the last months of his short life, but I think his statement is completely self-serving and an attempt to characterize this as a well-planned desire to avenge his honor, rather than the repulsive sexual assault which devolved into a murder that it was.
Whoa! Tell us what you really think! In all seriousness, though, I agree with you completely.
Allison claimed in his final confession that the reason he murdered Emma Orr was because he had been ill-treated by both her and Tony, so he sought to avenge this by seeking revenge upon them. He added that he had been planning this for weeks, carrying out her murder with cool efficiency and never wavering from dutifully completing his chores in the process. He, in my view, was not atoning for her murder. He was trying to justify it and present himself in a favorable, fantasy-driven light, where nobody messes with him and gets away with it.
Nemo me impune lacessit. No one harms me with impunity. The motto of Scotland, as well as Captain Nemo in Jules Verne's recent novel 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Have you read it?
I have, and I loved it. But Allison was neither Scottish nor a diabolical submarine captain who was always cool under pressure. There is no evidence to support the motive of revenge, and the level of planning was so poor he was guaranteed to get caught. As for being cool under pressure, he folded like a cheap deck of cards from the beginning and started giggling like a fool. So I am calling complete bullshit on the final confession and putting forth my opinion that the confession the Toronto papers attributed to him right after the trial was the actual truth, minus some details.
I concur. Farewell, brave Captain Nemo.
In fact, the evidence completely supports a poorly planned lust-motivated murder. Allison told his buddy Kinsman before the murder that he intended to sexually assault Emma, and his justification was that he was going to get what everyone else was getting from her. In his twisted brain, his sense of grandiosity may have convinced him that she might welcome this. The facts suggest she did not, and the newspapers wrote after his death that Allison had a very quick and bad temper, that he was wont to take out on small children and animals. His pride could not tolerate Emma's rejection, particularly when, in his view, all others had succeeded. He also saw it as an impediment to completing his final violation of her.
The sniveling, simpering twerp! Up yours too, Allison. Don't take that personally, Lalonde, though that was clearly meant for you and not for me.
Well, let's go with that. Regardless, the opinion of a cruel murderer like Jim Allison means nothing to me in any regard. I suspect most others felt the same during his life and death. His simpering expression was one he employed when he thought it would serve him, and, if you'll note, everyone called him Jim, not James, which I guess he thinks sounds more mature and respectful, I suppose. He claimed that after he shot Emma, she said to him, "Oh, James," like she was seeing him for the first time as the man he was. This guy had a very big ego, and his confession was really his own twisted tale of heroic vindication. No shame at all. He continued to try and manipulate people to the bitter end. Despicable. In further support of the motive of lust or sexually related murder, there is the condition Emma's body was found in, with her skirt hiked up over her waist and her drawers, or panties as we would call them, missing. Who knows where they went? but I suspect that he kept them and hid them somewhere. Sick bastard. I think that if the murder had occurred today, we may have found some physical evidence of Allison's sexual assault inside of her.
Yick! Gross! You can determine that sort of thing now?
We certainly can. And I know that you are well aware of the way killers will sexually defile dead females from your investigation into the Chattel case.
Only too well. Did I mention Allison looked like him?
You did, but that's not... Oh, never mind. Next, his suggestion that this was something he had been planning for weeks is antithetical to his actions. The hastily dug first grave, the attempt to dig another right on a stretch of farm property that was being extensively searched, the use of his own shotgun and feeble attempts to hide it, etc., etc. And, of course, the improbability of Emma abandoning the children she loved so well, particularly when one considers that Maggie was upstairs sick and 18-month-old Mary Bell was on the front porch.
The scoundrel left that poor infant to fend for herself outside. Unforgivable.
Indeed. Emma and Tony were reunited again for eternity when he passed in 1906. Jim Allison remained buried in the jail yard until archaeologists discovered his body in 1984. This isn't him. That photo wasn't available. This is the exhumation of Stoyko Boyev, who was executed in 1940. He was one of the other 3 men hung and buried at the Waterloo jail. Allison was moved to an unmarked grave at the Woodland Cemetery in Kitchener. A bitter irony I came upon in this case is that it appears that Tony had actually sold the farm earlier that year with the intent of moving into town. A newspaper article from January 13, 1897 says he sold the farm 8 months before the murder to a local man for $6,000. That was a substantial sum back then, roughly $200,000 in today's terms. According to the paper, the reason for the sale was that he had been suffering from sciatica for years, making farm work difficult, and would be moving into town for an easier life. However, it appears that deal fell through, though, for some reason, because Tony remained the farm owner, with his children living with him there until at least 1901. Also, I stumbled upon this article while doing my research on allegations you had quit.
Oh, for Pete's sakes, I never quit! I had to go to Buffalo to arrest another scoundrel.
I know. Be cool. You explained that earlier. What I was going to say is that right beside that spurious allegation, it seems that there was an article reporting a chattel mortgage on Tony for almost $5,000. A chattel mortgage is one that is held on movable personal property, like whatever personal effects and equipment they had. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole on this, but suffice it to say the premise that the Orr farm was a successful enterprise is questionable. That may well have explained Emma's dealings with Blair and her motivations for finding someone who could either help them survive or help her and the children leave.
A mother willing to do anything for her children? Perhaps. Or maybe she was a randy wagtail. Judge not, lest ye be a judge. I believe it was Shakespeare who said that. Regardless, I came away from this case rather liking Emma.
Me too, and you sure do know a lot of quotes. Shakespeare, eh? I've done some further research on the family, and there are living descendants, through Mary Bell, at least. They remain in the same general area in southwestern Ontario. That genealogical research is going beyond the scope of our channel, though, and I want to respect their privacy. I've also tried my best to respect Emma Orr and her family. The details I have given were widely and very publicly reported at the time. What I hope we have done is to provide a perspective on how criminal investigations are done, and that is, first and foremost, a search for the truth. We speak for the dead.
Very true, sir. Very true. We don't seem to spend a lot of time in thinking about the people the victim left behind, and their absence in the world. Best to stick to things we can have an impact on. And in our case, at the very least, that means conducting thorough, compassionate investigations.
One more final macabre thing that speaks to the public interest in these cases then and now is that Tony became the object of much personal attention at the time. I mentioned that he received, and entertained, I suppose, curiosity seekers at the farm. Also, it looks like he was getting a lot of mail via the local police. Letters of sympathy, one hopes, but it smacks a little of fan mail.
Yes, that was very common, and I suspect that media attention and the notoriety that accompanies these matters exists still. Perhaps there is a fundamental need to share tragedy in our makeups, and maybe even learn from it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, here's your chance to offer your final thoughts on the case. What do you think of Emma and Tony Orr? Or how about that Harry Blair? Some of you will also have thoughts on Jim Allison and the sentence he received as well. To be honest, though, I won't read any of that stuff. Those I'll leave to Lalonde to field. However, many of you will want to share your admiration for me. Those I'll read.
Brutally honest, as always, sir. Well, that was one heck of a case. It's still remembered to this day by folks in southwestern Ontario. I had read your account in your memoirs, but it wasn't until I combined that with the research that I did that I truly appreciated just how involved it was and how much detail has been preserved. It has been a real honor working with you on this.
Yes, I know. Nice to work with you too, Don.
Dave.
Dave? Dave's not here! That is such a great line. I hope it will be used again one day. Of course, I know your first name, but you'll always be Kid to me.
An honor. Any final thoughts?
Well, Lalonde, old boy, I suppose I should take the view that this world is a wicked, dangerous place, infested with masked murderers or desperate workers in the darkness who rob and slay and well-nigh deprive us of the joy of living. But I hold no such opinion.
Nor do I.
Crime increases, but not out of proportion to the increase in the population of our countries and of the whole world. Where men and women are, there will be found good and bad. But the bad are a hopeless minority.
Well said, sir.
Thank you, sir. Well, this case is done. Where do we go from here?
Next time, we will be looking into a case from Montreal in the 1920s.
The 1920s? You mean I won't be retired by then? And is that man a priest? Good Lord!
Let me keep you in suspense on both those issues. You'll certainly be along with me for the ride regardless. Can I count on you? Montreal might be fun.
Of course I will be. What would you be able to do without me? Montreal. Fabulous. I had a great friend in Montreal, Charles McKiernan. We used to call him Joe Beef. Sadly, he's recently passed, but his restaurant remains. Do you know him?
No, but I've heard of him in the restaurant. At any rate, the next murder involves a young man from a well-to-do family in the prime of his life. The killer will shock you.
Yikes! Shall we go for a wee nip of scotch to brace ourselves for that? Or perhaps we could meet for a discussion of your excellent novels. A book club, I believe they call it. How manly! Oh well, I could care less about that. I love books. Anyone who would like to join us is welcome. But of course, you have to go to the Amazon first to get the series.
I hope people do. I think they'll enjoy them, and just a reminder, you don't actually have to go to the Amazon in person. They're available online. Well, folks, until next time, I'm Dave Lalonde.
And I'm John Wilson Murray. And we are...
Two Old
Dicks.
Dicks.
How do you spell two again?
We are two old dicks and we say goodbye to all until next day, when we will share the tricks we know and how the clues began to glow.